Welcome. This is Dr. Alana James, and this is the second of the series of 6 webinars that will take you through step by step how to work with previously published journals as you begin to write your first one yourself. Welcome to the people in the room and also to those who will be watching by recording. Our quote today comes from one of the best books ever written, easily the most quoted book on writing. William Zinsser on Writing Well is the name of the book. And on page 52, he addresses nonfiction writing with a very important point. Every successful piece of nonfiction should leave the reader with one provocative thought that he or she didn't have before. Not 2 thoughts or 5, just one. So decide what single point you want to leave in the reader's mind. I know in my own writing, this is difficult because as academics, we put lots of thoughts together and we just live in a world that is rich with thought. So narrowing it to one point, the point that we want our reader to take away with them is hard to do and makes things very clear. So our goal is that by August, you will have something written, ready to send to a publisher of choice. Our goal for today is to overview what others have done this week with homework. Those things are available in the handouts. And then to move on to a discussion of using a model, creating an outline, and getting to your single point. In order to do that, we're going to start with the overview of homework, and we're going to look at it from the vantage point of what is the single point we think these other writers might have. And then we're going to discuss using a model. And I have some a way of proceeding with that I think will help it become clear. There was some lack of clarity that came through from the way the homework was written up. So we'll help move those ideas along. And then when you work forward with your idea of what is your single point, the golden thread as we call it, we can analyze headings, the points you want to make equal a point per paragraph, the transitions you want. All of those get us through the funnel of your work. And then that will be the homework, is for you to outline what you're going to write. That's pretty exciting, actually, when you think about it, that within just a period of time of 2 weeks, you're already getting to the point where you can outline your piece. So, and following this step-by-step process makes it happen. So this is just a slide to ask questions of the people in the room. And if you can, type in something. What is your single point to remember? What do you know? Or you may say, I don't know yet, or I don't know how to put it into words. But what would you say is the golden thread that runs through all of your research? And another way of putting that that's very provocative is, what are you staking your reputation on? Because a piece published tends to have legs of its own. You never know quite where they're going. And years later, someone will come up to you and say, oh, I read that piece on such and such. So, and it's a reputation builder. So I don't know, actually, if the people in the room want to answer this question. Raise your hand underneath your chat box if you do want to answer the question. If not, I'll move on. Oh, Nikki's raising her hand. Good. Thanks, Nikki. Descriptive phenomenology is an effective way for psychotherapists to integrate research into practice. That is worth staking your reputation on. And there's some things here to be aware of, Nikki. One is that much like I did in the beginning of my career, I staked my first reputation on my knowledge of a methodology. And so my first 2 textbooks were on action research and what they can do and how they get things ready and what they are effectively used for. This is an interesting point in that your writing will follow on about the research methodology as much as it will follow on about how psychotherapists integrate research into practice. It's a forked road, in other words, which allows you to have 2 output arenas. One is to go to journals that focus on qualitative methodology in general or phenomenology specifically. I don't know if there are journals on phenomenology, but there certainly were journals, still are journals on action research, and that allowed me to publish, because then what they care about is how that methodology plays out in the world. There will then also be journals that care about the advancement of psychotherapy and the integration of research into practice. There might even be 3 areas there, because I know in the world of education, there would be journal articles about practice, about advancing practice. So you might find several places that your work can be rewritten about 3 different points. And that's probably true for many of the people going through this process. So let's look at last week's sessions. And I'll have the slide up, and then we'll look at the homework, which is the document that's called Merged. Well, now it's not up for me as it should be. I must have closed it out. Let's see if I can get it back easily. Merge week 2 homework with no names. So we have 3 bits to consider. The homework was to look towards where you wanted to go, decide what kind of an article you wanted to write, find the journal that made the most sense. And we talked last week about where do you find journals. One way to find journals is to go through your reference list and to look up the journals that are quoted most by the people you cite, that are used most by the people you cite. Then to go through those journals and find out what they publish and whether or not you want to be in that realm. Look at their rules and regulations and their guidelines, see if you want to be in that realm, and then look at how you might use that background to prepare an outline. And I suggested that, and this is where some confusion came in, that you find some other work and then you see how they did it and then you wrote yours. We're going to go into that in detail today, but let's go through the 3 in the homework. Yvonne, welcome. And we're discussing the merged week 2 homework without names. And it's in one of the 3 handouts so that you can have it open and we can go along. Looking at the ocean and coastal management piece, Ocean and Coastal Management is a journal that, international journal, published once a month, dedicated to the study of all aspects of, surprisingly, ocean and coastal management. It's international, it's national, so they care about ocean and coastal management. Could be even local, regional, or national, international levels. So a breadth of interest. Their geared towards the sustainable development and conservation of these resources. That's been highlighted, so that's clearly in line. And then we look into what they're looking for. So they would take something that came from a single discipline or multidisciplinary. They are looking for things that could be natural or physical science, but also social science, policy, economics, and law. So they're taking, and this is where you want to put yourself, they're taking a broad range on a narrow topic. Other people will take a narrow range, as in if they were focused on a particular methodology, around a broad range of topics. So you can see narrow and broad comes into the editor's minds when they get your work. And always you are writing for the editor of the journal first. And so they're very clear in their minds on what are the constraints of their journal. Yeah, you need to be very comfortable that you're within those constraints. And then you're also writing for the public, and you want your topic to be of interest and to have some dynamic aspects that make them want to read your piece. Because if they are, I'll call that sexy. If your topic is a sexy one, then it'll be easier for the journal editor to go forward. And the reviewer might say, well, this journal article needs a lot of work, but it's a good topic and we recommend it coming back. That is more likely to get a recommendation to come back after review than one that is a topic they found, oh, we see this topic a lot and it isn't all that well written, so we're not going to recommend it to come back for review. So that's just a little snippet of insider information. So this author goes on, if we go down to the bullet points, they picked out looking at interactions of various oceans, resolutions of multiple use conflicts. So the difficulties that are within ocean and coastal management. And so then they went on and took an outline, and let's take a minute looking at that outline. Abstract, okay, most of will have an abstract introduction. This one had a multi-criteria approach to decommissioning. That was their topic. So the introduction explained that, I'm sure, and then the first heading was the topic of the document. Then there was a discussion on implementation issues, and then they moved into the methodological considerations. In this case, it's a case study. There were some conclusions and acknowledgments. One thing I might notice is they did more, I'm going to call this front work and back work. Some journal articles will do a lot of front work. They'll prepare you as the reader. They'll put you in touch with the literature. They'll get you to the point of what they're studying, what the problem is they're studying, perhaps how it was studied or how it was dealt with. And then they'll go very quickly through the back work, which is the methodological results, and they might just jump right into the findings. You might want to look at your journal again and see whether in general they tend to publish more front work than back work, or more back work. They're really very detailed when it comes to the methodological rigor, but with a little bit of explanation in the front, or they're balanced. It's just another level of critical analysis. The more you know about the journal you're writing for, the more you know about the editor and the people, literally the people on the staff who will be making decisions. And once again, they are your first readers. Now, her study is taking this model to the next level and following a similar format. So things that were said, and this is interesting because actually I've chosen to do something similar. When we find an article that really plays on things we're doing, it is useful to refer to that article and to go back to that journal and say, well, this article was previously published. It said X, Y, and Z, and now this new arena adds on to it. Maybe it's a new level of specificity. Maybe it's a new theoretical position. Maybe it's a new methodological or ontological position. And so we carry work that has already been proven to be in this journal interesting forward. Now, I'll turn this over for a moment to the people in the room and ask you to raise your hand if you have something that you can share that you noticed when you were looking through this first student's work. And I'll give you a minute. Put up your hand if you have something you want to share. Going once, going twice, no hands up, we'll move on. Next. Oh, sorry, audio was blurry. Oh. So I'll stop for a second. Adrian, scale of 1 to 10, how blurry? Should I back up or, and was it blurry to anyone else? Let me type this in. Blurry audio for everyone? Okay, in Dublin. All right, good. Okay, good. If it's okay in Dublin, then we will hope, fingers crossed, it's okay for the recording. And we'll move forward. Adrienne, please raise your hand if you have anything you want to add about the first piece. And if not, we'll go on to discuss the second piece of homework. All right, I'll move forward. The second piece is a journal about, the journal is called Phenomenology in Practice. Well, that answers the question I had earlier as to whether or not phenomenology, like action research, has its own journals. So this is a journal that is narrow in its methodological focus, but broad in the kinds of phenomenological processes it will discuss. So when you are someone who has learned as much about your research methodology and its uses as you have about your topic, these journals are often very excellent to not only publish in, but they probably have conferences, and the conferences probably will put you in touch with other like-minded practitioners and can be quite fun. So let's look at phenomenology in practice. Dedicated to the study of lived experience of a broad range of human practices. And they ask about the relevance of the article. Does it contribute to phenomenological study? Is it significant and original? And that goes to the point of is how you use this methodology going to expand the use of it? Or did you have a particularly sexy topic that they will want to see that methodological stance associated with? And then, are you a good writer? Excellent background, probably relevance, significance, originality, and literary quality and mechanics are underpinning all journals. But as we're seeing when we're looking at this, not all journals tell us the same story. This goes on to talk about how the peer review works. And There will be 2 peer reviewers. They don't take more, they're not given more than 3 months. That's excellent because sometimes you can have something out to be peer reviewed for 6 months or more. And then they submit comments, and then you can you're given a month to either edit the article or not. And if they suggest it go on to be published. So when you look at a peer review process such as that one, you figure my piece will be out for about 6 months, which is good. Because then if they didn't like it, you could take their notes, you could upgrade it, and then you could send it on to the next journal. Broad guidelines. They even have some suggestions of who you can look for, writings you can look for, and how you submit what they want the text to be, so what the guidelines are. And you submit by email. All very good. Now, let's look at copyright, because this is the first one. They publish twice a year, except for special themed issues. And the copyright is retained by the author with first publication rights granted to the journal. That's pretty typical anymore. That allows you to publish it in ResearchGate and anywhere else on social media. You can publish it. That allows for it to have more citations. Citations help the journal as much as they help you. But you want to look for that, because if you're giving copyright to the journal, then you won't be able to put it up, and it won't have as many legs for your own career. So that's something to look into. First rights. Also, some publications allow you to send to more than one journal. This one clearly doesn't like it because they want first rights. But one of the journals I was looking into said, yeah, if you want to send it to more than one journal, just let us know that you are doing that. So it used to be pretty strict rules. You never sent it to more than one journal at a time. Obviously, those are blurring with increased openness and access. So she looked at 2 articles from the journal, and oh, that was good. She counted the words in the abstract. So short abstracts, and then she looked at the different parts. There was an introduction part that was 5 paragraphs long, and then it's useful to look, isn't it, at not only the name of the section. So the section talked about phenomenology, about intentionality, about embodiment, about the particular musical experience under study. And then there was conclusions and acknowledgments. So, and she or he looked at then how many paragraphs, how the whole thing was put together. Let's look at the second one, see if it's similar or different. Oh, this is potential. So object, so knowing right ahead of time, this is very good. Putting down at the very beginning, this is what I want to do. This is my goal, or the objective, is to convince the reader that descriptive phenomenology has a lot to offer the practicing psychotherapist who wishes to engage in research. Now, I want to point out right there that the object of this paper is to convince. That moves it instantly into the realm of argument. And this author should know backwards and forwards the parts of an argument. Because if you want to convince, then you want to make a case. You want to say that there's a case for this. You want to back the case up with evidence. You want to tie the evidence back to case that you're making and then conclude that you in fact have done that. So let's see if she or he does this. Introduction, gold standard in psychotherapeutic research, gap, relevance, science practitioner model, and a quick summary. Then going into descriptive, discussion of descriptive empirical phenomenology, psychotherapeutic phenomenology fit, creating it as the two together, and practice-orientated research, conclusion, description of how it works for the therapist. Now, what we don't see here, that I don't see right off the bat, is where the data that's going to convince me is going to be. So, and what I'm saying that for is actually twofold. One is to the author to say, think about argument, think about whether this fits, and then make a choice. To what extent are you married to convincing? And then what does an argumental stance give you that this doesn't have? And to what extent do you want to be more of a take a step back and merely and have it as a discussion without the intent to convince? Because this is a good overall discussion, especially if I knew precisely where there might be some data used to help me understand it better. I'm hoping that with these two examples already, you can begin to see how much you can gather from your preliminary work and how important it is to have a structure behind you where you can show this preliminary work to someone who knows and understands the process, and they can give you feedback. Because I'll use myself as an example. I had an idea, and it was an important idea, and I still think it's an important idea, but it's for 2.5, 3 months, I've been sort of taking stabs at making an article out of it, or a white paper, or something, because it needs to be out there. This idea needs to be out in the world. And not having an underpinning did not allow the people who were working with me on it to have a clear idea of where we were going. And so we stumbled around a lot. For this last author, having a clear idea of where you wanted to go then immediately allows critique to say, is this straight on, or is it slightly off center? And if so, which way do you really want to go? Because all the way through writing a journal article, you are faced with forks in the road. And if you don't know it's a fork in the road, you just go the way of the fork without understanding that, in fact, you've made a choice until you write yourself into a dead end, which happens more often than people talk about. Okay, second one, I'm finished talking. Would the people in the room raise your hand if you have some feedback, that some ideas you had going through this? And this time I'll type it. And for comments. No hands going up. Let me ask again, still doing okay? Those watching by recording too, does this all make sense? No feedback. Does that mean? This is always the problem with webinar recordings. There's this point at which, is anybody hearing me? Is the webinar service working properly? Seems to be working from my end, but I'm not seeing the feedback from the audience. So Nikki's there. Oh, too inexperienced to comment. Fine. At least you're hearing me. Thank you, Nikki. Is it interesting? Or is it making sense? There are perhaps many layers. It's a fascinating process to help people get this, because it's not, I fully appreciate what Nikki said about feeling inexperienced and thinking, wow, I'm looking at this and I didn't, I was proceeding along a pathway only to find out that I'm really in the middle of this big forest of choices. And I don't mean to intimidate with that. I think the bottom line is to say, work with people. This is a good experience to do in a group, if at all possible. So good for everybody here who's going through this first session as a group in total. Should we go on to the next one then? Next session is an area of research that I'm the least knowledgeable about, other than just how journals work, because this is a biological journal on trace element research, and the journal is of trace elements in medicine and biology. So there are words in this section that I can't actually easily pronounce. Decreased expressions of zelenoproteins as poor prognosticators of gastric cancer in humans. So we know right away that it's a medical journal. It's very detailed. And he's actually looked up, I think, 2 journals here. The Journal of Trace Elements in Medicine and Biology and Biological Trace Element Research. So we have a couple of journals. And my first question would be, would these journals naturally report on clinical trials more often than not, or would they be reporting on lab results? How large a study are they used to having in their journal? I think when you look at the STEM journals, you need to be very careful that your work is in the level of the field that is being reported, because some of these journals are geared towards large production, large center research, where they would have they would do large clinical control trials over a number of areas, etc. And they just would have so much more data than doctoral research would have. Others would do a mixture, and so be really critically aware of the size of the research. Now, so things came up. This particular journal, the clinical, he's actually giving me, she is giving me several journals. Fundamental Advances in the Basic and Applied Metastasis Research multidisciplinary, laboratory-based. So right there, laboratory-based, experimental or clinical and therapeutic research. So this is a journal that spans the field. It includes such areas as molecular biology, pharmacology, tumor biology, and clinical cancer treatment. So wide, broad range within the more narrow field of metastasis. And so he chose a paper and the abstracts. So it goes abstract. This author did actually what I tend to do is, I believe, when I read papers that are of interest to me that I will use as a model, I tend to tear them apart and literally write down the parts, the words, copy and paste the words from the journal that I liked and that I would want to mirror or play off of in some way. And so this person has the abstract, which follows pretty standard scientific lines, didn't make notes of the keywords or abbreviations other than that there would be some, and then outlined why was this important, some about the particular biological factors, and then a little bit about the literature, and then what that leads us to. And so this brings me to the point where I want to talk about funnels. For the people in the room, you may have heard in other parts of our work with doctoral work, a discussion about funnels. You want your topic to bring your introduction brings your reader in, gives us an overview of where we're going. Then the next section is often lit. That funnels us into what's happened in the field. Next section is often methodological considerations. That funnels is down. However you do it, if it's an essay format, it funnels you in. However you do it, you're looking at this model, that article, in order to critically analyze how they took the reader from one place to another to get to that final point. And so this person, if you'll look through the rest of the article, it's a pretty standard funnel for scientific research. And this person worked out for themselves how they would be following the same funnel process. And for any of us who are using a scientifically output, we follow condensed versions of the same funnel that the thesis and dissertation follow. Now, that said, one of the people who turned in their homework this week asked a question saying that she'd had a lot of difficulty finding work that was finding the research. She wanted to find journals that allowed her to have a broader range of what she wanted to say. And so she asked about, how do you include writing for places like The Economist? How is that writing done? And essentially, you could put in a piece. You have to go, same process follows through. You go to their magazine. It's a magazine in this case. You see what they're writing. You see who they're going to take writing from. They'll be quite clear on that. You might have to propose a piece to them prior to actually sending them a full written piece, maybe, maybe not. And so you follow the same step by step, but your funnel is different. And so that's why we work with our models, and we'll go on now to see how that is done. Raise your hand. Do anybody in the room have questions you want? Glad that this is being recorded, so you can, if you want to go back through these 3 merged documents and see maybe the second or third time through, you'll think, oh yes, okay, I see that. I see how they relate to each other. So we've looked at the handouts. Raise a hand if you have questions or comments. This may be a conversation I'm having with myself more than sometimes, getting a glimpse of the process. Good. That's exactly what we can do. Get a glimpse of the process. Just to reiterate quickly, thank you for that prompt, Nikki. The process is figure out where you want to write for, figure out why, figure out what you want to say, then go to the place you think you want to write for, find out from them what their guidelines are, whether or not your ideas of what you want to say fit, what they're going to tell you. Then you go more in depth to what they publish, and you do a critical analysis of 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces that they have published, and you analyze what's the funnel that they're taking. These published pieces are taking the readers through. That's the norm for this publication. And then you critically analyze the one that's closest, that you can play off of the most, and you follow that norm. You'll then know for a fact that your headings and what you want to say, everything fits, because there's absolutely no point in doing what I've done actually for the last 3 months, in trying to write something without knowing where it's going to go or how it's going to get there, just because it has to be said. It's a great exercise, and I'm very glad I did it, but I'm feeling a little foolish in teaching this at the moment, because it has cost me a lot more time than it needed to. If I had done the process that I well know how to do, because I've done it before. So good for you following the process. And thank you, Nikki, for suggesting that a glimpse of the overall process might be good. Here's what we're doing next. We're taking the critical analysis of the model. If you have a model, if you have 2 or 3 that really are model for you, these will merge in this analysis. And you're going to put the section heading in, let's say, introduction. And then you're going to put in the second column all the things that they did in their introduction that you liked. And then in the third column, you're going to write the what you would do. And that will become with the idea that that will become the points you want to make, and that will in fact become the outline, because the section heading is the Roman numeral on your outline, and the what you would do or say are the points you would make under each heading. And then it translates easily enough. You can organize them so that they make a funnel. So broad points are first, medium points are second, and you're funneling your author or your reader into the next section heading. And so points to remember, and then I'll take you in the last 7 or 8 minutes that we'll have today. I'll take you through a piece that I'm working on with some of these ideas. And I'll do what I did last time. I will do the homework for you so that by the end of the first week, you have a version of it to work from. If that's helpful, I know I find it helpful to work from seeing how other people answer an issue, and then you'll be able to finish your own. So each heading guides the reader down the funnel, typical research funnel, intro, what's known in the literature, methodology, results, and findings. You know that. It's the same as your dissertations or thesis. Each point you want to make is one paragraph. So in the introduction, you might make 3 or 4 points. That'd be 3 or 4 paragraphs. To go back to the person who did the homework that way, they counted how many paragraphs in each section. That's the points that were being made. Each point is a paragraph. You arrange your points in an order that moves you from big to little, and now you set up your process. Okay, let's look at the piece that I put up that's called Article Example, the Fully Functioning University and Higher Education. This is an article I'm going to be referring to, and actually I started to do this homework, but my computer this week has been acting up and I literally could not find where I put it. So I'm going to talk us through. If you have the article example open in front of you, you'll see that they start with an introduction, and the first thing they do in that introduction is they talk about the previous article. I'm going to start the same way. I'm going to talk about the 2008 article and this one in 2013. So now I'm talking about 2 previous articles that led into this. That'll be my first paragraph. Then they talk about the results of the previous one, and that's good. I'm not going to have the same results I'm playing off of, but there were reasons that this idea of fully functioning resonates with me. And so I'm going to lead with that. And the point of the second paragraph becomes, well, so what am I going to do with those concepts? The third paragraph is, why is it important? That fits as well. And there might be a second or a third, why is there important point to be made? So those will be, and then this heading concludes the last paragraph, and this heading starts the main conclusion. And I like that setup. So my introduction will follow the same general pattern as theirs, and I'll be making different points. My points will be refining the fully functioning university, of course, to the fully functioning postgraduate school, graduate school or postgraduate studies office. And then there will be, they're talking about the concepts involved, and there's a longer discussion, and that brings in other kinds of research and literature, and I will follow that pattern as well. So you can see, I'll go back to the outline that you'll do for your homework. I would put in introduction. I'd have the first 4 or 5 paragraphs would be very much the same. This is what they did, and I would do the same thing. And I'd make in this what I would do section, might even have it headed differently as the point I want to make. Each point becomes a paragraph. I hope this is clear. Elena, welcome. You'll have the recording and some specific points. I didn't see if you came in the room about the question you asked about writing to other in other arenas, but that question was answered. Okay, no problem. This is set up so that people can participate whether or not they can make it to the live meetings. But the requirement is, in order to have your work looked at during the sessions, when homework is due, you have to come back to me and say, here's either my homework or here's why I don't have my homework this week. This is not a session for lurkers because I want to use these as examples, case studies for your universities that say, this is how many people participated, and this is how many articles were written, and then ultimately, this is how many published articles came out of it. So thank you for participating in the case study. And the way that you become a participant in the case study is by turning in homework. And that's excellent on all accounts. That's when your work gets to be reviewed and it moves faster. Okay, homework, build your spreadsheet, outline your article, and set it in with what you want to put in each place. If you have more time than that, then because some of the people who turned in homework actually may find that pretty easy, then go ahead and draft your introduction. And we will read them next time. List any questions you have for the group. Those are well appreciated. I say absolutely that we're happy to make sure that everybody's questions get answered. And I'm looking now to see when our next, please type in any questions you have now. The next one will be July 7th, Friday, July 7th. And then we'll have another 2 weeks, and then we'll have 2 back-to-back where we're finalizing our writing, and hopefully everybody will have a chance to read each other's work in between those. So are there any questions today? Raise your hand if you have anything else to say. For those in the room or watching by recording, we'll see if any hands go up. Very good. If you have questions or any considerations, please don't hesitate to type them to me. I'm at alana@doctoralnet.com. And this is for people watching by recording as much as for people participating with us. One of the things we love to do is help people get published. And with that, I'll stop the recording. Looking forward to your homework in 2 weeks.